Hello student, how are you? Assalamu alaikum. Hope all of you doing well. Today we are going to discuss about the trade barriers in international trade. Learning outcomes after this lecture, you will be able to understand what are the trade barriers and its different types. Trade barriers. Trade barriers are restrictions on international trade imposed by the government. They are designed to impose additional cost or limits on imports and or exports in order to protect the local industries. The trade barriers are imposed by the government by placing rules and regulations, tariff, import quotas, and embargoes. The four different types of trade barriers are tariff, non-tariffs, import quotas, and voluntary export restraints. Trade barriers. Here is the definition. Trade barriers look like a negative impression, but it helps to increase the economy of particular country by reducing the imports. The trade barriers are imposed by the government by placing rules and regulation, tariffs, import quotas, and embargoes. The four different types of the trade barriers are tariffs, non-tariffs, import quotas, and voluntary export restraints, as I already explained in the previous slide. Now one by one I explain the different types of the trade barriers. Number one is a tariff. Tariff is one of the most used for the trade restrictions since it increases the cost of imported goods and services. Tariff are mainly used to collect the revenue on the goods which are imported. Tariff are used mainly based on some of the following reasons. That is why we impose tariff on the imported goods. There are many reasons, out of which I explain few. For example, domestic employment. We imposed tariff on imported goods. What are the imported goods? Imported goods, all those goods which are produced outside the country. That's why these types of the goods do not help to improve the employment of the domestic local country. That's why country, in order to increase the employment, impose tariff on the imported goods and local industry should be encouraged to flourish. Number two, infant industry. I already explained infant industry, the local industry, the developing countries industry is the new industry which cannot compete the international markets. That's why government of the developing countries impose tariff on the imported goods. Unfair trades and national security are the reasons for the tariffs. Second important type of the trade barriers is the import quotas. Import quotas limit the quantity of goods and services that can be imported. In import quotas, there are legal restrictions by the domestic government on the goods which are imported. Import quotas keep the restrictions on basis of the first come, first serve. If the goods are reached to its limit, then no more goods are imported. This type of the trade barriers often keep licenses for importing goods. For example, United States has imposed a quota on textiles which are imported from the India and other countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan. Our third type is non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers include some government regulations, rules and directive delays to keep the foreign goods away from the domestic markets. Due to the regulations, the production techniques are unique to domestic customers. The different types of the non-tariff trade barriers are embargoes and others, which I explain in the next slides. Embargo. Embargo means the complete trade block between the countries. This type of the trade barriers are totally banned of importing goods and services from the particular country. For example, United Nations has imposed an embargo on trade with Iraq as a part of the economic sanctions in 1990. Second important type of the non-trade barriers is the subsidies to the local goods. In these trade barriers, the government subsidizes the local firms and allow them to sell their products at low cost compared to the foreign markets. Whenever there are more foreign firms enter into the country, then the government impose a tax on them and reduce the tax for the local production to make more competitive in the domestic and the foreign markets. Local content requirement. Instead of imposing a quota on number of goods or services to be imported, the government can put a restriction on certain goods made domestically. Foreign companies face a problem of exporting assembled products, and cost to sell the product is also high. So instead of assembled products, some of the products are done in the domestic market. This improves the employment in the local market. The last one is the voluntary export restraints, VER. A country facing a continuous huge trade against another country may produces or maintains raised pressure to a self-imposed limit on exporting goods. This type of the limiting export is called voluntary exports restraints. For example, Japanese automobiles imposed to US over a number of years. Consistently, the US imposed such limits on itself. Conclusion. In conclusion, a government imposed a restriction on international trade of goods and services by using different trade barriers. Trade barriers in various aspects like tariffs imposing taxes on goods which are imported, non-tariff import quotas which are totally banned from a particular country, and voluntary export restraints. Trade barriers describe the global business domestically and the trade between the countries. These are the four types of the trade barriers the government uses directly to discourage the global business. Thank you for your patience.